Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm Margaret Brennan. We're joined now by Dr. Umer Shah, Executive Director of Harris County Public Health. He's coordinated the medical response at NRG Stadium this week, where more than 2,000 evacuees were sheltered and even had to evacuate his own house. Doctor, are you back home yet?
Yes, my family came home 2 days ago. It was a pretty harrowing experience for all of us. And it just underscores that this hasn't just impacted our community, it's impacted even our responders.
What is the feeling there on the ground? Do you have a sense that you have moved into the recovery phase?
Yeah, there are still some places where some streets that are having some flooding that has continued to have some impact on the recovery side. So that is, I don't want to say we've completely gotten out that immediate phase, but yeah, we're moving towards that longer term look at what does recovery mean for our community.
And you've been telling people to avoid those floodwaters. They've got everything from snakes to alligators, and now this is concern about chemical contamination. For you, what is the greatest health risk? Yeah.
Apologies, there's a truck right behind me, so I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. But just to let you know that, we've been talking to our community throughout this, before the storm, obviously during the storm, and even now post-storm, that flooded waters have a number of different hazards, and that includes, like you said, critters and snakes, those kinds of things, but also the real concern around down power lines, and really, our biggest concern is that these waters are not safe. They're not. There are harmful, whether substances or chemicals or bacteria, other kinds of infectious disease agents. And so when folks are being exposed to these, we are really asking them, we're imploring them to take precautions so that they are cleaning, disinfecting, and doing those things. And if they have to even throw out items that they have that have been exposed to that. That's very difficult. As you know, for example, if children have their favorite toy and that toy has now been exposed to water and you can't clean it, and we're saying throw it out, that inherently becomes a really challenging message to a child.
What are some
these
of
are the kinds of things that are really...
Yeah, what are some of those chemical contaminants that you just gestured to? I mean, there was concern about this chemical plant and some explosions there and fumes in the air. But then there's also concern that there might be chemicals in those floodwaters. What are you seeing? What contaminants are there?
Right. So the kinds of things that you have to always think about is that the floodwater is, first of all, it's got, even if it looks clear, it likely has something in there. But the real concern is that household chemicals, just very, everyday chemicals that people have in their homes have now mixed into those waters. Then you also have the challenge where you might have a mechanic shop or another, business that may have been flooded out, and they may have other more industrial type of chemicals that can go in. And so I rather than talking about the specifics, there are a lot of different chemicals that can go into the mix. And then obviously, as you've mentioned, when you have large-scale chemical activities, that really starts to become an increasing concern. So we have to really manage that, and that's why that message is just stay out of those waters or do what you need to do to clean and disinfect.
Do you feel you have all the resources you need? If you don't know the contaminants yet, do you feel like you're prepared to deal with the fallout?
We've been through a lot of emergencies before, everything from Tropical Storm Allison, that we had a large-scale flood event, as you know, Hurricane Katrina, where we had 27,000, right 12 years to the date, right behind me in the Astrodome here. Hurricane Rita response, where we had to evacuate, and then Hurricane Ike that hit us, and then storms in between. So we always use those experiences to really help us as we move forward. But the one thing that I would say is that no emergency is alike, and that this is a massive, massive, devastating emergency for our community. And on that national level, as many of the health departments across the system know, we are oftentimes the offensive line of that football team. People don't know the work that we do until something like this happens. And so I think it's really important to know that resources for capabilities are absolutely always necessary. Do we have enough? you never have enough, but we have really what we think right now to continue to manage this acute phase.
All right, Dr. Shah, thank you very much. Good luck to you. And we'll be right back with our panel.
Thank you.
So stay with us. And we're back with our political panel. Ruth Marcus is the deputy editorial page editor and columnist for the Washington Post. David Sanger is the national security correspondent for the New York Times. My namesake, Margaret Talev over here, is the senior White House correspondent for Bloomberg. And Nancy Youssef covers national security for the Wall Street Journal. Overnight, David, we had some big news. North Korea carrying out a major nuclear test, as President Trump has tweeted. Was that a confirmation that it was what North Korea says it was?
It sure sounded like a confirmation that it was at least a big test. We don't know for sure that it was a hydrogen bomb. The North Koreans claimed about 1.5 years ago that they had exploded a hydrogen bomb. We don't think they had then. But it certainly looks to be 4 to 6 times bigger than anything they've done before, which is to say 4 to 6 times bigger than the bombs that took out Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So this was a big explosion, and if they don't have a hydrogen weapon yet, they will soon. I think Mike Morrell had it about right when he described the paucity of options here, but I also think that the Trump team tested for the first time with this. They may not fully agree that there are no military options. You hear members of the team talk about military options that they think they have. They agree they'd be horrible. They agree there'd be a lot of blowback to it. But I'm not sure they're persuaded at this point that military is off the table.
Margaret, what are you hearing is happening at the White House today? The president tweeted. What's next?
That's right. And the president's 2 tweets on this subject were interesting because the first one was pretty measured. You could call it a General Kelly H.R. McMaster tweet. And the second one moved pretty quickly into how South Korea is weak and so is China. But the president's at church this morning, and then he will convene a meeting with his national security leaders. And I think at that point, they'll resume these conversations that have been ongoing. I mean, this is the idea that there could be a test like this has been known and predicted all summer, but to come so soon after the fire and fury comments suggests it's either a test of what President Trump will do next, a test of how China will react, maybe both. So they'll go right back today and huddle at the White House and discuss these options.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, we know that the Secretary of State's been making calls. He talked to his counterpart in South Korea. But when we talk about disconnect within the administration, you saw that earlier this week. You know, at the Pentagon, the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, came and seemed to be reversing a statement that the president had made when the president tweeted, "Talking is not the answer." Then Mattis said, "We're never out of diplomatic options."
That's right.
Who's right, and which is the strategy?
Well, so far, Secretary Mattis has been right in that after those comments were made, the White House put out a statement about a readout of a call between President Trump and the President of South Korea, President Moon, in which they talked about diplomacy as an option. The reality is that Mattis has an interest in pushing diplomacy. From his perspective, he's trying to protect relationships with allies, reassure them that the U.S. is there to support them, reassure the West itself that there are other options than what he sees as catastrophic military options. Yes, they're there, but the consequences are so big, and nobody understands that more than the Secretary of Defense from the position where he sits and the military options that he's looking at a regular basis.
And yet the president tweeted this morning, as you referenced there, Margaret, South Korea, I've been telling them appeasement is not an option.
Yeah, it's very confusing because at some point a priority has to be chosen. Is it the trade relationship with South Korea? We saw this week some discussion about tearing up that 5-year deal, or dealing with the North Korean threat. That is, allies all have to be on the same page, and if we're arguing with South Korea about trade, it makes it much harder to get on the same page about how to address South Korea. So there seems to be a back and forth about what the priority is in terms of the administration. And we saw that in the tweets in which he referred to appeasement with South Korea, which, by the way, became a breaking news alert within the South Korean press.
And that's a few things that are alarming here. One is that at the very moment that we should be making sure that we're on the same page with our allies, we seem to be unnecessarily and surprisingly provoking them, both on the talking about tearing up the trade deal and on the appeasement front. And then to David's sort of scary remarks on, I understand why the administration would want North Korea to believe that military options are on the table, but there are options, but they are, as you said, catastrophic, and the thought of using them. So if talking is not the answer, it might not be the answer alone. Maybe talking with sanctions, maybe the containment, but military options are a disaster.
Well, we had the Treasury Secretary out this morning already saying, well, we're writing another round of sanctions. What are the options, David, that you referred to?
Well, there are sanctions you could go do, but we've been trying sanctions since 1953 in various forms, since soon after the Korean War ended. So if you wanted to do sanctions that would make a difference, you'd have to go after their energy supplies. And going after their energy supplies is very hard to do.
And that's a China question.
That's a China and a Russia question, but primarily China. And the Chinese still have not come to the conclusion that it is worse to have a nuclear North Korea than to collapse North Korea. So they are not likely to do anything that would lead to collapse, and cutting off energy could go do that. There are cyber options. In other words, a way of trying to attack the North Koreans without it being clearly us and without causing the kind of chaos that you would from bombing from the air or doing something similar to that. The problem is we don't think they're terribly effective. We reported that there was a cyber operation against their missile program that President Obama authorized starting in 2014. Unfortunately, if it was working for a while, it's not working anymore terribly effectively. And finally, there are options that would basically cut off all interaction with the country, intercept shipping, do the kind of embargo that the United States did against Japan prior to Pearl Harbor, tried against Cuba at various moments. But that risks conflict at sea.
Ruth, Congress is coming back in session.
I hear that.
We're gearing up for that. Senator McCain will be returning to Washington, but before that he went to Italy, and he made some pretty extraordinary remarks at a forum, and I want to read these to you and share them with our viewers. And he pointed to sort of America's role in the world, saying many are questioning whether America is still remaining engaged in the world, upholding traditional alliances and standing up for the values we share. And this has much to do with some of the actions and statements of our president. And he gestured to the debate underway in the country right now about what kind of role America should play in the world. The future of the world will turn to a large extent on how this debate in America is resolved. What is he bringing back to Washington for President Trump?
Well, you know, Senator McCain has never been exactly shy about stating his views, but now he's sadly and gravely ill.
This is not politics ending at the water edge.
I have to point out that he wrote a very full-throated op-ed for the Washington Post this week, where he talked about how Congress needed to stand up to President Trump, about how he acts as if Congress is not a co-equal branch of government. So he is back and loaded for bear, and I think deeply worried, as are many members of Congress and many of his colleagues, about a retrenchment in the world of the United States and a need to sort of send signals to our allies that while they may have qualms about this president, he will not be president forever, and that the U.S. is not going to abandon its role in the world.
Margaret, that's an extraordinary message to be sharing with our allies, but Senator McCain clearly thought it was a necessary one.
Yeah, I mean, I think John McCain is in full legacy / leave nothing on the table mode right now. And he's saying the things that the House Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader either don't feel that they should say or feel that they can't say strategically for reasons that have to do with party unity or midterm elections. But I also think that if you asked McCain, he would say that Trump started it in terms of not leaving politics at the water's edge, and that the president crossed the line in a way that previous presidents haven't. Where does this all go? Politically speaking, in terms of geopolitics, look at Angela Merkel, look at the French leader, look at the rest of the world leaders. Our Western allies increasingly open to publicly expressing some of their concerns about U.S. leadership. So I'm not sure, broad strokes, what impact it has on the world. I think domestically it has an impact, and McCain's effort seems to be to embolden Republicans in Congress to speak out more forcefully, even if it involves contradicting the administration.
Well, the crisis most immediate at home has been Harvey. You saw the president return to the state of Texas this weekend, and he said, as tough as it has been, it's been a wonderful thing to watch. Perhaps a reference to some of the signs of unity there. Ruth, how do you grade the president's response?
So I think you need to grade the president on two different metrics. One is kind of technical merit. How well has the federal government, working with state and local governments, responded to this crisis? And that may be the most important metric. And I would give the administration so far a good grade on that. We have not, Brownie would not have gotten in trouble for a heck of a job, Brownie, if he had in fact been doing a heck of a job. So on that, some worries about what's happening with these Superfund sites, some quibbles about if these proposed budget cuts had gone through, what might have happened, but technical merit, good grade. On the emotional response, let's be clear, this president is kind of empathy impaired. And so I think he wants to say the right thing, but the right thing doesn't come out of his mouth. So you see comments like the one you cited. He'll talk about the great turnout. He'll use the opportunity to take a jab at the media. He doesn't do feel your pain very well. That is not good for him. It's not good for the country, but I think he's trying his best on that.
Does the debt ceiling increase that needs to happen get tied to this Harvey relief?
I think in a strange way, all of the problems that are coalescing in September for Congress in a very short time frame, the debt ceiling, the government funding, have been made, ironically, perhaps a little bit easier by Harvey. So some of the usual, because we're going to need billions of dollars, the administration has asked for the first tranche of that money. And so the usual maneuvering about how we can't do this without offsets and things like that, and the threats to FEMA operations and other operations that would not just come from the debt ceiling, but from shutting down the government. I'm hopeful that Harvey, for all the suffering it's caused, I don't want to be empathy impaired myself, is going to make what needs to happen in Washington a little bit easier.
And we know the president's going to announce his decision on this deferred action that's going to impact the children of immigrants who brought their kids here illegally. That's going to be on the 5th. Does that undo the goodwill that we've been talking about?
It depends both on what plan he's going to unveil and how he unveils it. And
do we have indications so far?
We do, but sort of. But everyone I talked to in the White House says that this has been a matter of intense debate where feelings have changed and shifted in terms of precisely what to do. But look, here are the parameters that we all know. There is some push for congressional Republicans to take the lead on the fix. And there is the counterbalancing threat of the lawsuit, the court challenge by a group of red states attorneys general. And the president trying to find that sweet spot in the middle where he fulfills a campaign promise to crack down on illegal immigration, but shows empathy for dreamers. So what does that look like? Does the president say the administration is not going to enforce, not going to support, defend DACA in court challenges and really wants Congress to fix it and then kind of leave it to Congress to fix it? Some version of that is what people are expecting. But as we all know with this administration, until it happens, it's very hard to know precisely what. The thinking, though, with DACA, just like you see Harvey potentially tied to debt ceiling, there's a thought that if this ends up in Congress with real action, there may be potentially room for compromise where DACA and some sort of wall effort are paired together. And that's the thing to look for next week.
Oh, it's a long laundry list, and we've got through about half of it right now. Thank you. We're going to be back in a moment with some thoughts from one of our favorite Texans here at Face the Nation, Bob Shieffer, who's going to give us his impressions of Hurricane Harvey. Americans have been moved by the pictures and stories of people helping others, even total strangers, in the aftermath of Harvey. A rare moment of unity in an often divided nation. We asked one of our favorite native Texans, Bob Shieffer, who covered his first hurricane in Texas back in 1967, to give us his thoughts about Harvey, a storm that hit Texas 50 years later.
Hurricane Beulah was my first one. It slammed into the Texas coast back in 1967, before I came to CBS. It left 1/6 of my home state underwater. Harvey would be even worse. But as I watched what Harvey wrought, I was struck by just how similar those pictures were to my memories of Beulah 50 years ago. Our technology is so good now, we knew exactly when Harvey would make landfall and a lot more. But it's not the technology we remember. It's realizing the awesome power of nature. This was Beulah. This is Harvey. Somehow the big ones always turn out worse than we thought. This is me, one day into Katrina.
We knew it was bad. Tonight we are beginning to understand just how bad.
In a hurricane, it's all hands on deck, whatever your job. Reporter Brandy Smith of our Houston affiliate KHOU was doing a live report when she saw a man trapped in a flooded truck. She flagged down a rescue boat team and led them to him.
I am terrified for him, and here he comes.
As she was reporting, her station was being evacuated because of high water. But it's always the most vulnerable who suffer the most. These kids got through Beulah. These will make it through Harvey. The pictures of traffic jams of Texans who didn't wait to be asked for help made me proud. They just loaded their boats on trailers and headed into the worst of it. Nor will I soon forget the pictures of these poor people in a retirement home. We can be thankful they were found. As it always is, we saw the worst bring out our best. After the awful scenes we saw just weeks ago in Charlottesville, in Texas, we saw white kids and black kids just being kids. In a hurricane, it doesn't matter if you are black or white or brown or purple. Maybe we do have to be taught to hate. The statistics this storm has generated are staggering. More important are the numbers we'll never really know. All those who just showed up to help. Like Mattress Mac, the furniture dealer, who opened his showroom as a shelter to hundreds. Singers who sang.
Oh, my soul.
Barbers who showed up at shelters with their clippers. People forming human chains to rescue others from the flood.
Go, 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 go.
Bakers who baked. And the pizza guy who would not be deterred. And yes, that is Spider-Man. Only Texans would know all this unfolded on and around the very battlefield where Sam Houston and his ragtag army against all odds fought for and won Texas independence from Mexico. This week, their descendants met another powerful force. It's not over yet, but my money is on Texas. For Face the Nation, this is Bob Shieffer.
That's it for us today. Thanks for watching. John Dickerson will be back next Sunday. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan. Have a great Labor Day.